Bills Mafia, welcome into another episode of the Air Raid Hour. Tonight, we are diving into an early preview of your Buffalo Bills 2025 season, breaking down the schedule week by week, sizing up the opponents, and spotlighting the biggest matchups. We've got all of that and more lined up for you, but first.
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
Welcome in. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on X at the Bills Guys, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on X at Tilt Money. And Dave, the 2025 NFL schedule was finally released. We knew all of our opponents. We just didn't know the order. Now we do. And I'm sure anyone listening to this show has probably heard a ton of different reactions to the actual schedule. So we're not going to react too much, I think, to the schedule, but we're going to sort of use it as a launching pad to start getting comfortable with the 2025 season, looking at our opponents, looking at some of the changes in the personnel and the coaching staff that they've made, previewing like when we're going to have some long weeks, when we're going to have some short weeks, and just sort of chunking the season into parts and taking a look at it as we prepare ourselves, obviously, for the long summer ahead and training camp before we get back into this whole regular season swing of things. So I'll start with you. Any general takeaways from the Buffalo Bills schedule before we start to get into the week by week minutia of it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's not a surprise. Obviously, the number of primetime games, they get 5 primetime games. Interesting that 2 of them are Thursday night. Obviously, I will say generally, I did find the primetime schedule as far as the opponents and when in the season a little interesting, and we'll get into that. Or I should say 4 of the 5 primetime games coming before the Bills week 7 bye. So a lot of early primetime games, and including a very interesting and odd one at Atlanta for Monday Night Football, which kind of didn't really seem like I don't know, it seemed like an obvious choice for a primetime game, but here we are. So no, I think it's cool that they're going to open the Sunday Night Football against the Ravens. A cool early season rematch, obviously, of the AFC divisional round from a year ago. And, generally speaking, we like to pick these things apart, but it's one of those things where it's not anything where I felt like, you know what, the Bills got like shafted or they got like a huge advantage anywhere. I just felt like a really kind of neutral schedule to me overall. And I see Eric saying he's going to be at that Atlanta game. One thing just on that note, I would love to go see a game at that stadium. It looks really cool. Nice. I know it's been now open for just a couple years, but it would be cool to go see a game at that stadium. And I'm sure that's part of the reason why the NFL did that. Atlanta, an up-and-coming team, potentially with Penix there. Some interesting stars, I would say, on that Falcons team with Drake London, Bijan. Showed some promise last year, and obviously the Bills will be a big draw to Atlanta as well. So look, it's an interesting schedule as far as the primetime games are concerned. But other than that, I think like overall not much to complain about, I guess, because like we tend to kind of complain about, like they got to play, on short rest or this or that. But we'll get into all that tonight, obviously.
I'm not too surprised by the 2 Thursday night games because honestly, I was sort of bracing for some of that because when you look at the Buffalo Bills and like the miles they have to travel, they have the second fewest miles to travel of any team in the National Football League this year. I mean, what they have to travel compared to like what teams like the LA Chargers have to travel, it's an insane difference in mileage. So I wasn't shocked they got a couple of short weeks. I think that's sort of the NFL's way of making up for the fact that they don't have to travel as far as some of the other teams. The biggest takeaway for me is like all those prime times loaded up at the start of the season. I thought maybe they'd spread them out a little bit more, but it seems like as the year progresses, they really like the Buffalo Bills in that 425 window. And you've got a ton of really good games from Cincy to Kansas City to Philadelphia, all in that 425 window. So that really is the NFL showcase. The NFL really wants those 425 games. I think they value them even more so, I think, than some of these primetime games. So I think that's just as big a compliment to the Bills as any of the primetime games they could have gotten. There's a heck of a lot more eyeballs 425 on a Sunday on CBS than there is Thursday night on Amazon Prime. So when half the country's still probably at work. So I think the Buffalo Bills had a really nice schedule this year. I think a hot start is going to be key. For their first 6 games are at home. That's crazy. And we already knew this, but now we know the order of it. But our 4 toughest opponents on paper, Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, all at home. This is shaping up to be a very good schedule for the Buffalo Bills if they can stay healthy. And obviously there are other factors in play as well. But S1 Nico comes in and says, what do you guys think of the schedule setting us up for the 1 seed, or are we going to have a disappointment season? I don't know. I think every year I look at it and the schedule is the schedule, but I look at our roster. I think when you look at it, if you use last year's records as how good or bad a team is going to be, the Bills had the 5th easiest schedule in the National Football League. I don't think that that's a good indicator of how easy or hard your schedule is. As we walk through it week by week, I think the Buffalo Bills have a moderate schedule with some real heavy hitter games in there. To me, it's the same expectation every year. Go win me somewhere between 11 and 14 games. Win the AFC East. And if we get the 1 seed, chef's kiss. But obviously I don't need it. As the season progresses, that expectation might change, right? But I think right now the Buffalo Bills are an elite football team who got even better. You look at the schedule, I think they're better than most of the teams they play. To me, that's the expectation. Get me to 11 plus, get me the AFC East. Everything else from there is cake, but obviously expectations change as the season goes along.
Yeah, you obviously want to win the division first. That's your number one priority. But as we've seen with this team, obviously home field advantage can play a big factor. We saw how much of a factor it was with that Ravens game in the playoffs last year. And you also and I'll talk about this as we go through the schedule. I did take a peek at teams like Baltimore and Kansas City and Cincinnati and even the LA Chargers as far as how their schedules started and how their schedules ended the season. The Bills do end their season with 3 of their last 5 games at home, including their last 2 games in a row at home, and one of those being the Philadelphia Eagles. So one of the tougher games there. And, obviously we'll get to this as we get through the chunks of looking at this, but there are some interesting sort of tidbits around some of these other teams and their schedules. I would just start out by saying that first part of the schedule for the Bills before the bye week, which is an early bye week in week 7, is definitely something that you'd want to look at. And as it stands, right, we don't know how the season's going to play out. Teams change every year. You'd love to see them take advantage in those first 6 games before the bye. I know Baltimore's week 1, but they have a pretty good chance to get off to a hot start. And conversely, the Kansas City Chiefs play the Eagles, Ravens, Detroit Lions, and LA Chargers in 4 of their first 6 weeks. So there is an opportunity there for the Bills to get a head start and for the Bills possibly to get a leg up on sort of that marathon towards the 1 seed. But obviously we'll hope for the best there.
And that's a great point too, because I don't know, and this could be revisionist history because my brain is just not functioning at a level where I can think about this right now in maybe an accurate fashion, but it always seems like the Bills are chasing the 1 seed. It never seems like the Bills are like in the lead position and other teams are trying to catch them. Like, it's not like the Bills have blown a 1 seed this year or in the past couple of years, right? Maybe there was one season where they might have, but to my recollection, it's always like, damn, could the Chiefs lose a freaking game? Or dang, could the Ravens lose a freaking game so we could catch up? So you're right. Like, that might be a really interesting talking point, especially if we can handle our business early in the season, I shouldn't say sneak out of week 1 with a win. I think that's a 50-50 game, but handle our business week 1, do what we're supposed to do in those weeks that follow, right? Win 5 of your first 6 games or win 6 of your first 6 games. And then you're in that pole position and everyone else is chasing you as your schedule gets tougher. So I think that's a great point. Something I didn't even think of. So Let's get into it and let's walk through the schedule sort of week by week. Let's start with week number 1, Sunday Night Football versus the Baltimore Ravens, MVP 1, MVP 2 race this year. Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. When you look at the Ravens, pretty chalk, really. When you look at their roster, they brought in Nuke Hopkins to add to the receiving core. They added some pretty notable draft picks in Mike Green and Malachi Starks, who should contribute right away. They got Chidobe Awuzie in free agency to sort of sure up one of those cornerback spots that kind of hurt them last year. Their biggest departure is like Justin Tucker. Same staff, mostly the same roster. Is it good to get them early, knowing that there's probably not going to be very many changes to what they do schematically? Or would you have preferred them later on in the season?
Well, I will say this, it's going to be annoying one way or another for either the Bills fans or the Ravens fans after week 1 to have to hear about what happened in week 1 basically for the entirety of the season
Yeah.
until possibly the playoffs, right? Because it was the talking point of the year last year, the Bills hosting that playoff game and everyone wanting to go back to that, what was it, week 3 or week 4
Week
game
4. You
against
just reminded me. You
week
just
4
reminded me
game.
how miserable that 10 weeks was. So thank you for that. 12 weeks was.
And I'm just saying, when we got to that playoff game, that was, like the Ravens are going to run all over the Bills, or these are two different teams.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, these teams are going to look a lot different probably in week 1, be playing possibly differently in week 1 than they are come playoff time. I actually do like that they are playing the Ravens week 1 because we've seen kind of weird things happen in week 1, and not to say that's necessarily an advantage for the Bills, but I do think when you look back at it, and you can look at week 1's, remember the Lions beat the Chiefs on week 1 a couple years ago, right? When it was like, oh no, and then the Chiefs end up coming back and being, great that year anyway. So it's like, you almost get a little bit of a pass depending, you get a little bit of a pass with week 1, whether you win or lose. And like, you tend to not read into it as much because it's the most difficult week of the season in the NFL to predict is week 1 coming out of the gates. You just don't know what's going to happen. So I kind of like that they are playing the Ravens week 1. I think, like you said, it's a 50-50 game. I don't necessarily think it's an advantage for either team, but I do think it is, from a talking point perspective, maybe a little easier to discount what happens in week 1 later on down the season.
And if you're the Buffalo Bills, if you're a Bills fan and you're looking for like the pass rush to really kick it into high gear, I don't think you're going to see much of a pass rush the first 2 weeks of the season, because then week 2, 1 p.m. on a Sunday at the New York Jets, you now have Justin Fields as starting quarterback for the New York Jets. So you're going to have some stylistic carryover week to week between Lamar and Justin Fields and running quarterbacks. I think the Jets, looking at their roster, they're probably going to lean into that aspect of Justin Fields' game a lot. Whole new coaching staff for the Jets. Head coach Aaron Glenn, offensive coordinator Terry Engstred, defensive coordinator Steve Wilkes, special teams coordinator Chris Banjo. I just mentioned Justin Fields is their new quarterback, at least for now. 2 very young offensive tackles in Olu Fashanu and Membo, their first round picks. So 2 top, I don't know if Fashanu was top 10, but 2 top 15 picks at offensive tackles, left side, right side. The major departures are obviously Rodgers and Adams from that offense. They still got Garrett Wilson coming back. They still have Breece Hall coming back. So some weapons there, even though there's not a lot for the Jets. They're still in the middle of sort of that rebuild with Aaron Glenn. On defense, Sherwood takes the place of Mosley, who's gone. DJ Reed is gone. They added Derek Nottie, Andre Sisco, Brandon Stevens. New staff, new quarterback, a young OC that's calling plays for the first time since he was an XFL offensive coordinator in 2020. What are your thoughts on this New York Jets team?
I mean, the New York Jets out of the gate have a tough order. Now they do get both of these games at home, but they start week 1 at home against Pittsburgh, and they stay at home in week 2 to play the Bills. So 2 solid opponents for Aaron Glenn to start his tenure with the New York Jets, with the Bills coming to town in week 2. I think this Jets team will be, I think they'll be feistier this year. I think that'll be a reflection of Aaron Glenn. I think that early in the season, it's a good thing that the Bills play the Jets, a team under a new coaching staff, a Lions team when Aaron Glenn was in charge of that defense. It did take a little while to kind of find their footing, but when they did, they became fairly dangerous once they got sort of the personnel and the coaching lined up. I think it'll take a little bit of time. Now the Jets have talent on defense, but On offense, they are going to be lacking. It's going to be really Justin Fields as the X factor there. They obviously made the investment in Mason Taylor. I think the Jets really did a good job in shoring up their offensive line over the last couple of years. So I don't think it's going to be an easy game for the Bills to go on the road there in week 2, but it should certainly be advantage Bills with a new coaching staff for the Jets and them trying to kind of find their footing early in the season. So you'd like to think they could go in there and win. The Bills have struggled against the Jets in recent years, whether it was Rodgers or whether it was going back to when Darnold was still there. Like, they have struggled a little bit against the Jets. That's been a team within the division that has given them some problems. So we'll see if that continues. But you do like the fact that they're playing a newly coached team early in the season, a division team, give them a chance to go 1-0 in the division.
I mentioned earlier I wasn't too surprised by the 2 Thursday night footballs, given how few miles the Buffalo Bills have to travel this year. I think this is one of those examples right here. You have the Bills at home to start the season, then they go to New York City, then they have to come back on a short week to play the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night football. We get Miami at home in September, and then we have to travel there in the winter. I don't think the NFL wants a repeat of that game, that heat game that the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins played in. I think the NFL might be sick of the bickering back and forth between Bills fans and Dolphins fans about weather. I think this whole we play at home versus them early and we play them late thing is probably something that's going to stay for the next decade or so. I'll be surprised if that really changes. But when you look at the Dolphins coming now into week 3, Thursday night football, the Dolphins are really running it back. Tua, they got Devin A-Chain. Obviously, Jalen Wright's going to have a bigger role this year with Mostert gone. Ingold, Hill, Waddle, Jonnu Smith. They changed the guards. That's pretty much the only thing they really changed about the offense. James Daniels and second-round pick Jonah Savanea are going to be the 2 new guards there, but the tackles are the same. The center is the same. Some very minor changes on defense. Obviously, they added Kenneth Grant to the front, which should really help them. But Javon Holland's out, Jordan Poyer's out, and Melon Fonwu and Ashton Davis are in at safety. Everything else is chalk. This was a really weird offseason for Miami. They are sitting on a roster that has shown to be, quite frankly, not very tough. They are still mostly all flash with little substance. What are your thoughts on Miami's offseason and their matchup against the Bills in week 3?
Yeah, Bills played Miami in week 2 a year ago. The Bills' divisional schedule, by the way, much more spread out this year than it was a year ago. First half of the schedule last year was, a little spread out through those first 7-8 games, but then they ended with 3 straight divisional games, if you remember that. Now they play Miami and the Jets back-to-back weeks 2 and 3 respectively. And here they get Miami week 3 at home for a Thursday night game on the short week, like you mentioned. I really, on paper at least, feel like Miami is not a playoff team. I just feel like they took a step back last year. Tyreek Hill obviously had a poor season a year ago. Some of that due to Tua being in and out of the lineup, as we know. The health of Tua and what he's going to, come back and be this year. He did come back at the end of last season, but I just don't know what the vision is for the Miami Dolphins, losing key defensive players. And some favorites, right? Holland, obviously, we mentioned their defensive line can never seem to stay healthy when they need it. The offensive line there has struggled for them to pass protect Tua. And I just don't see this team as a playoff team. It would not shock me. It would not shock me if the Miami Dolphins were the worst team in the AFC East this year. I'm not saying they will be, but it would not surprise me at all.
My hot take is when we play them again in week 10, they're coming off of a Thursday night game. So that means they're going to have 10 days to prepare for the Bills in week 10. I think they might have a new head coach by the time we play them in week 10. I think Mike McDaniel might be fired. I don't know if he'll still have a job. I really do not think very highly of this Dolphins team. I think it's just a walking corpse at this point. I think almost everyone involved is ready to move on at this point. I think that team's going to get blown up next offseason, and there just wasn't a lot of options that they had. So they just decided to run it back. But there's just no buzz coming out of South Beach at all, like there has been in the last couple of years prior. So who knows? Maybe that quiet is good for them because they've had so many buzzworthy, talkative, hyped up off seasons. Maybe that grounds them a little bit and they surprise people. But I think the Buffalo Bills very well could be playing a different head coach when they face the Miami Dolphins the second time around this year. Week 4, we get the extra rest. So we have the rest advantage heading into week 4. 1 p.m. versus the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans is going through a sort of a rebuild of their own. New head coach in Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator and Doug Nussmeier, defensive coordinator is new in Brandon Staley. No idea who their quarterback is going to be. Is it going to be Tyler Shook? Is it going to be Spencer Rattler? Is it going to be Jake Hayner? We don't know. Obviously, they got Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheen. Like, that's a cool trio, but Cooks is kind of in the end of his career, and Olave and Shaheen can't stay healthy. So who knows of those 3 receivers who will even be available by the time the Buffalo Bills play week 4. They got 2 young tackles as well in Banks and Fuanga. They got Dylan Radoon slated to start at left tackle. So they got a little bit, some questions there along their offensive line. Paulson Adebo is gone, but they added Justin Reed to that secondary, but they're pretty much chalk on the defensive side of the ball for the most part. To me, this is just a matchup you have to win, especially with the rest advantage. You really cannot let a team like the New Orleans Saints beat you.
No, this is one of those games you look at the schedule, and obviously every game in the NFL has to be taken seriously. But, start with Baltimore as a tough game. Then you have 2 divisional games in a row, and you look at week 4 and you say New Orleans Saints at home with the extra rest after the Thursday night game. Like, this has to be a win for the Buffalo Bills. You cannot lose at home to the New Orleans Saints with the question marks that are going to be surrounding them. Probably not enough deep into the season for them to really, whatever quarterback it is, maybe to have really settled in and kind of have found their footing. At least that's what you would hope for if you're the Bills. And new coaching staff as well for the New Orleans Saints. So Brandon Cook's second stint now with the New Orleans Saints, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that quarterback situation. I think New Orleans is competing for possibly maybe the worst quarterback room in the NFL now that Derek Carr has retired. I mean, you could make the case that they have the worst quarterback room in the league. But obviously we don't know what Shook's going to be. And we saw Rattler last year was not good, in my opinion. And this is a game that the Bills just absolutely have to win. It should be one of the easier games on their schedule.
Then they follow that up going on to Sunday Night Football. So they head into prime time against the New England Patriots, who got a lot of love from the NFL schedule makers this year. And I think with good reason. I think you'll agree with me in this statement that New England probably is the second best team in the AFC East right now, behind the Buffalo Bills. They have Mike Vrabel, who is a proven head coach. They've got Josh McDaniels, who is a proven offensive coordinator. Terrell Williams is a pretty good defensive mind as well. Plus, Mike Vrabel has that defensive background. To go along with all that, their roster, even though it's not all the way there, it looks pretty promising. You got Drake May at quarterback. You got Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson in the backfield, sort of that thunder and lightning type of deal. You have an assortment of receivers from Stephon Diggs. Who knows, if he's going to be ready by week 5, coming off that ACL. But you got Mac Hollins, Demario Douglas, Kyle Williams, who was your guy in this year's draft cycle, Kayshon Boutte, Javon Baker, who I think was also your guy in last year's draft cycle. Yeah. And Jalen Polk. So just an assortment of receivers to see who's going to come out on top sort of in that wide receiver room, plus Hunter Henry. They have improved the offensive line from left to right. It's going to be Campbell, their first round pick, Cole Strange. They added James Bradbury to get a veteran pivot. They're kicking Michael Onwenu back inside to guard. And then they got Morgan Moses, the vet, at right tackle. Is it a perfect offensive line? No. Are there questions? Yes, especially Campbell's arm length, Moses's age. There's questions, but it certainly is night and day better than it has been in years previous. And then the defensive side of the ball, they just added a bunch of talent. You got Christian Barmore coming back, Milton Williams, Christian Zonga, Harold Landry, Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis. That secondary of Davis, Duggar, Peppers, and Gonzalez is pretty nasty. On paper, in my opinion, the second best team in the AFC East right now. Their season's probably largely going to be dictated on Drake May and his development and how those receivers shake out. But I can see why the schedule makers put this game in prime time. I think it'll be closer than people think.
Yeah, Bills Patriots obviously has a very interesting history for a number of reasons. Obviously, the streaks the Patriots had against us with Brady, but a divisional game, an up and coming, young, mobile quarterback in Drake May going against, the MVP and Josh Allen. New coach Mike Vrabel. Obviously, Vrabel, well known from his stints as a player in New England, his coach at Tennessee. So he's he's a draw as well, just to have him prime time. But they really did do a lot to improve that defense on paper. I agree with you. We'll see if it plays out, but they are potentially pretty solid defense. And then you mentioned the receivers. We'll see about Diggs, but it's really like a volume situation where the cream should rise to the top in this competition for them during training camp. Baker was my guy last year. They still have Kendrick Bourne as well. Boutte is there still as well. It's like they have like 7, 8, 9 guys deep. And yes, Diggs is the name, but we don't know about the injury. It's kind of like, okay, we have 8, 9 guys. Let's see who the 5 best guys that come out of this group. And that could be pretty good for Drake May. So certainly nice to have this game at home to start out against the Pats. But I do think this team is going to be competitive this year, not just against the Bills, but I think in general, I think this will be a competitive team. And I think you will see a pretty decent improvement from the Patriots from comparing 2024 now to 2025.
Then in week 6, you get another young quarterback. You get Michael Penix, who's started the back end of last season, and now he's going to be the first year as the full-time starter there in Atlanta. The rest of the offense is chalk, but it's a pretty good offense. They've had a pretty good offensive line the last couple of seasons. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. So Penix has plenty of weapons at his disposal. The issue in Atlanta last season was the pass rush, and they sold out to try to fix this pass rush, adding veterans like Morgan Fox and Leonard Floyd, drafting Jalen Walker in the first round, and then trading a future first rounder to get back into the first round to take James Pierce. They added another veteran in the front 7 and Divine Diablo, sort of an off-ball linebacker that they can play around with. And they drafted Xavier Watts, who they can sort of tag team with Jesse Bates. And I think he'll get a lot of run early as a rookie. So Atlanta's defense will be better. On paper, I think that's a really good team in Atlanta. But to me, right now, they're still just like NFC South good, which is like a 500 football team, hoping that they're going to be the ones that year in the NFC South to make it to the playoffs and be that 4 seed. The Buffalo Bills do have a rest disadvantage, though, with Atlanta coming off a bye. But to me, outside of Tampa Bay, you can't lose these NFC South games this year. These are teams that are consistently year after year 500 football teams. They're mediocre chasing teams. Like, if you're the Bills outside of Tampa Bay, who I think are legit, we'll talk about them later, you just can't lose to a team like Atlanta, especially with the bye week the week after.
You can't lose to a team like Atlanta. A primetime game in Atlanta, that team, you never know. They could have a decent start to their season. They are at home against Tampa Bay week 1. They go to Minnesota, at Carolina, Washington. They have the early bye in week 5. So they would have only played 4 games by this point. I think there's some hope for Atlanta fans this year that they're going to have a turnaround. They were competitive in the division last year. It kind of came down to the end there, and they kind of fell, in the last couple of weeks to Tampa, eventually to Tampa. But this is a team that has a lot of promise on the offensive side of the ball. You're talking about London, Mooney, Pitts, Bijan. That's a team that has some offensive firepower. And yes, they lacked in pass rush. We'll see if that early bye maybe helps them or maybe doesn't, because you like those young guys maybe trying to get off to a hot start in the season. Maybe a break for them isn't what they would need at that point in the season. I think that Atlanta crowd is going to be fired up to welcome the Bills in that early in the season, especially because at that early in the season, the Falcons are likely going to still be in the mix in the NFC South anyway. So it'll be interesting. You can't lose that game. I do expect that game will be tougher than we want it to be, but you cannot lose that game.
Just a Tippecanoe with a great comment here. He says, Penix and Tua on the schedule. How often do you play 2 lefties in a season? Pretty unique. Yeah, other than playing Tua twice a year, which oftentimes he never makes it to the second game, we don't often play a lefty twice a year. So that'll be interesting too. So you got some scrambling quarterbacks week 1 and week 2. Then you got a pair of lefties sort of the back half before the bye week. It'll be super interesting. A couple of people commenting on my background, like what's different about Judge's layout here. A couple of things. Number 1, my camera mount is broken, so my camera is on my laptop. So you're seeing me at a different angle today than you're used to seeing me. You're used to seeing me from up top. You see me from down below today, and my headphones have finally broken to the point where I can't fix them. So I'm wearing them around my neck. So just a myriad of technical issues on my end this evening, but we'll get them all fixed up before our next live show here. Before we get to the back half of the Buffalo Bills schedule, let's talk about, number one, what realistically we need our record to be, right? To me, at worst, we can be 4-2. At best, obviously, no duh. Like, let's hope we're 6-0. But I think it's actually realistic. If we get past the Ravens, I think it's legitimately realistic that this team could be 6-0 heading into the bye week. And you made that excellent point. This could be the first time that other teams are chasing us. And I would really love to be in that position.
Yeah, it would be, I think 5-1 at worst, 6-0 best. Obviously, there's not a difference there other than one game. And you would look at that and say the most likely game they would lose is Baltimore. Now, if they beat Baltimore and lose another one of these games, that'll be unfortunate. But to me, 5-1 is what I'm hoping is worst case, right, going into the bye, because you want to be in the driver's seat for that one seed. Kansas City, as we mentioned, has a tough start to the season. But to me, 5-1 is what I would say is worst case here. Maybe that's a wrong thing. 4-2 worst case, 5-1 acceptable, 6-0 ideal, right? I think that's what you could say. Anything worse than 4-2 in that stretch of games to me is a big disappointment.
Yeah, 100%. And before we get to the back half of our schedule, a quick word here from our sponsor.
What's up, y'all? Khalil Shakir here. When I want Buffalo pizza, it's got to be Picasso's.
Khalil Shakir. Your team, our pizza. Picasso's. This is Buffalo Pizza.
This episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. With 4 convenient locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell, Picasso's Pizza has been serving Buffalo's best pizza since 1980. Whether you are a local or across the country, you can enjoy their delicious pizza delivered fresh to your door. Visit picassospizza.net to place your order today. Once again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, coming out of the bye week, the Buffalo Bills head to your neck of the woods. I know you were telling me off camera that you're going to try to get to this game. Week 8, 1 p.m. It is a Sunday against the Carolina Panthers. Outside of Tet McMillan, it was really a defensive-heavy offseason for the Carolina Panthers. They're mostly running this offense back. They got Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard. They added Rico Dowdell, sort of like a 1B back. Tet, they're bringing Leggett back, Adam Thielen back, Jalen Coker back. Jimmy Horn Jr., a later round pick, has been getting a lot of love in Carolina for some of the plays that sort of he's been making. So maybe Jimmy Horn Jr. is a factor for them at some point. But then along the offensive line, it's the same offensive line last year that protected Bryce Young and allowed that shorter stature quarterback, a pocket to play with. In Ekwonu, your guy from NC State, Lewis, Corbett, Hunt, and Moulton. On the defense side of the ball, that's where they struggled the most. They needed to add some pieces, and they did. Bobby Brown, Tershawn Wharton, Patrick Jones were some veterans to the front seven. They drafted Nick Skirton. They drafted Princely Emilion. They added Christian Roseboom. They added Trayvon Moehrig. They drafted Lathan Ransom. This Carolina team is definitely better. Obviously, it's still another must-win game, especially given the rest advantage the Buffalo Bills are going to have coming off the bye week. It'll be the first game with Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt as well. So while the Panthers, again, are not a pushover anymore, I still have a lot of questions about their secondary, looking at it on paper, and the Buffalo Bills need to handle their business in Carolina on that Sunday in Week 8.
Absolutely. Coming out of the bye, and yeah, I'm going to try to get to that game. The thing here with Carolina is they're fans, and I know a lot of them, they have some hope now, right? They saw what Bryce Young did at the latter part of last season after he came back into the lineup for that brief period where Andy Dalton kind of stepped in and he showed some promise, right? They didn't really do much on the offensive side of the ball, as you said, other than adding Tet McMillan. It's going to be an interesting situation in Carolina. I think that defense is still going to be largely subpar. I think that there will be a very Bills heavy crowd at that game as well. There are a lot of Bills fans in Charlotte, in North Carolina. It's a pretty heavy area for relocated New Yorkers, and there's going to be a lot of Bills fans at that game. And the Panthers generally don't really have a typically super strong home field advantage as it is. It's not like the Carolina Hurricanes in hockey. Like, they have one of the best home ice advantages as a North Carolina pro sports team. The Panthers don't have that at Bank of America Stadium. So that shouldn't be a factor. The Bills coming out of the bye, I think the Panthers are still a little ways away from being super competitive. They might be better than the Saints this year, but I still don't think they're really going to challenge. I don't expect them to really challenge Tampa Bay or even Atlanta. That's a game the Bills have to go in and just take care of business.
Next up is the game that I think Jim Nantz and Tony Romo have circled on their calendar, and that's Week 9, 4:25 at home, once again in the regular season, versus the Kansas City Chiefs. You got Andy Reid still there. Patrick Mahomes is still there. Chalk-ish for the Chiefs offense. They're running it back with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, and they get Rashee Rice back. They did add Jalen Royals to the receiving core in the draft. They did add Elijah Mitchell and Brashad Smith, so they added some variance to that backfield. They added Jalen Moore and Josh Simmons to that offensive line, so it'll be interesting to see where they all shake out. My hot take by Week 9 is I think Josh Simmons will be their left tackle and Jalen Moore will be their left guard. I think so. From left to right, you'll have Simmons, Moore, Humphrey, Smith, Taylor. I think it's probably one of the better offensive lines they'll have had the past couple of years. They've been really snake bitten trying to address that left tackle position. I really like Simmons, and I think that they might have finally gotten their guy there at left tackle. On defense, they lost some guys, but we talked about this during our draft coverage. Like Spags, what Spags wants, Spags gets, and everyone they drafted is just such a Steve Spagnuolo dude, from Omar Norman Lott and his pass rush ability to Ashton Gelati and his just speed to power, his just power, not speed to power, but just his power, his bull rush. Noel Williams and his aggressiveness in the secondary. Jeffrey Bassa, sort of an off-ball linebacker, former safety. Like, just a lot of the dudes they added on defense fit what Spags likes to do. I think they'll all contribute in some way, shape, or form. They added Christian Fulton, which is huge because I think it allows McDuffie to go back to the slot where he had most of his success. The Chiefs are going to have the rest advantage, having played the week prior on Monday Night Football, or the Bills, having played the week prior. Oh, no. I might have
The Bills have the rest advantage.
The Bills have the rest advantage. Excuse me. I read my notes there wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bills actually have
Chiefs
a little
play
bit
the Washington. Yeah, Chiefs playing a Monday night game against Washington the week before. So pretty tough game for them.
Yeah, apologies for that. But honestly, like, this game ultimately doesn't matter. It's like the playoff matchup is the one that's going to matter. Like, maybe it'll be better just for the football gods if the Buffalo Bills lose this one, because then maybe they'll get one in the postseason. Because it seems like the Bills are always the victor in the regular season, and the Chiefs are always the victor in the postseason. So yes, obviously you're the Bills. You want to win this game. You want to continue to make the statements you're making in the regular season, but ultimately it may not matter.
Yeah, I mean, we typically say this game doesn't matter too much. I think it might matter a little more this year, because if the Bills come out of the gate hot and they're in the driver's seat for the 1 seed, let's say they've only lost one game to that point, and let's say maybe the Chiefs have only lost one or maybe 2 games to that point, you want to be able to hold serve if you're the Bills and keep that advantage in the AFC playoff picture, and you want to have that head-to-head matchup in hand against that team. So if it did come down to a tie, you had the same record at the end of the season, you have beaten that team head to head. I do think it's a realistic possibility that these teams do end up with the same record. So look, I'm not trying to say that it's super, like, it's the most important thing in the world, but like, I think this year where that game is kind of in the middle of the season, the Bills can't look past the Panthers the week before coming out of their bye, knowing that the Chiefs are on the horizon there in week 9. And still early enough in the season where you're jockeying for position for that playoff picture could mean a lot come the end of the year. So yes, it ultimately doesn't matter. It will matter what the Bills do in the playoffs. But I do think if you are a person who really wants the Bills to get that 1 seed, like, this is a game you really want to win if you're the Bills, especially because you're playing this one at home as well. And the Chiefs are coming off that probably going to be a tough Monday nighter against the Commanders the week prior. So you want this one if you're the Bills.
And then the following week, the Buffalo Bills are at the Miami Dolphins at 1 p.m. on a Sunday. Again, my hot take, because Miami's going to be coming off of a Thursday night football game. So they're going to have 10 days to prepare for this. I think they could have a new head coach by then. Like, I think they could have bottomed out by this point. I think that team's getting a little stale, a little stagnant. I think they could have a new head coach, and they'll be looking to move on and reset by the time they play the Buffalo Bills in week 10. But if not, the Buffalo Bills have Miami again in week 10. And then week 11, 1 p.m. on a Sunday at home versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. New offensive coordinator and Josh Grizzard. He was their passing game coordinator last year, so an in-house candidate that was promoted. They've obviously got Baker Mayfield. They've got 3 quality backs in Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker. On top of having Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Palmer, they added Emeka Ibuka. They've got a really solid offensive line. They added Hassan Reddick. They drafted some really Todd Bowlesy type of guys and Elijah Roberts and David Walker to add to the front 7, and Benjamin Morris and Jacob Parrish to add to the back 7. To me, this is a well-run team. I think they're a dark horse Super Bowl pick out of the NFC if their offensive coordinator is worth a damn. They're going to go as far as Baker takes them, but this is going to be a tough matchup for the Buffalo Bills. I think Tampa's going to be good this year.
I think Tampa will be good. I would have probably seen this game more as a Monday night candidate as opposed to at Atlanta if you were going to play an NFC South team on primetime. Obviously, the way the schedule planned out, the Bills have a Thursday game the week after, so Monday night game didn't really make sense here, although they could have had the Houston game not on a Thursday.
The NFL is just really trying to shove Penix down our throat.
Yeah, and I mean, Baker against Josh, I mean, that's going to be super fun. I think it's good that the Bills get this one at home. I think as far as like games that week, this could be one of the games of the week, and it's sitting there at 1 p.m. on a Sunday. So very interesting. Probably one of the better games on the schedule that week. And Tampa Bay, we don't play the NFC South teams that often. Remember the last time we played Tampa Bay with Tom there, and we made that kind of comeback late in the second half there, and ultimately came up short. But that was a fun game. Obviously, different situation now with Baker there, but I like watching Tampa Bay. I like watching them play, and I think Todd Bowles is, now that he's kind of gotten the respect probably that he deserves, I think it's just an interesting team, right? And I think that for me, like the Bills have experience going against Todd Bowles, right, from his days with the Jets. So it's just a fun matchup, and I think probably the best 1 p.m. game in the slot that week, although I haven't looked at the other ones.
Then we got a short week, and we got to travel all the way. I think this is our longest trip of the year to Houston. Taking a look at Houston, who knows what kind of football team we'll be seeing by week 12. They have a new offensive coordinator in Nick Caley. Obviously, that's something that is going to play out over the first 11 weeks. We'll see what kind of schematic changes they make. He comes from sort of that New England tree. How are these wide receivers going to look? Tank Dell should be back by then, but who knows? That injury was pretty gruesome. They've obviously got Nico Collins. They added Christian Kirk. They drafted Higgins and Knoll, and they also have Xavier Hutchinson. So they got 3 Iowa State guys there. They added Berrios. They added Justin Watson. So who knows how that wide receiver room shakes out? Their offensive line, how is that going to shake out? At left tackle, are you going to have the veteran in Cam Robinson by week 12? Or are you going to have Ursary, their second-round pick, that they're probably pretty high on? Is it going to be Titus Howard or Laken Tomlinson? Is it going to be Juice Scruggs or Ed Ingram? They've got Patterson and Blake Fisher. The offensive line is going to be a huge question for Houston as well. Their defensive front is solid. It's a D'Amico Ryans coach team. They're going to get after you in terms of the front 7. They might have the best secondary in the NFL on paper. Stingley and Lassiter on the boundary. They added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to go along with Kalen Bullock, and that allows them to move Jalen Petrie to sort of that star nickel position. It might be the best secondary in the National Football League. Like, that's going to be a good defense. It's going to be a big challenge for the Buffalo Bills. I think ultimately the Texans are going to be a team where the offensive line is going to be what decides how their season goes. How big of a factor is it going to be in this game by the time we get to week 12? I don't know. The Bills pass rush better be ready, because I think that's what's going to maybe win them a football game like this. When you look at how tough that Texans defense might be, okay, we need to make CJ Stroud's life miserable because this might be a lower scoring contest type of deal, or turnovers might be key in a game like this. Obviously, it's hard to project that. 12 weeks into a season, but just looking on paper, that's kind of what you start to think about when looking at their roster. So the Bills need to attack Stroud in this game and get him off script, but this could be another interesting game, especially on a short week too. It'll be sloppy.
It'll be sloppy, an up and down kind of season for the Texans last year. They had games where they looked really good, and obviously they beat the Bills last year, so maybe a little bit of a revenge game here for the Bills going to Houston for the second year in a row. The Texans have kind of had the Bills number the last few times they've played them. Obviously, we know the playoff game, Josh Allen's second year. Texans came back, win that game. Bills go into Houston last year and lose. Obviously, that was a tough one with Josh not maybe having his best game of the year there, but that was early in the season, whereas this one's coming later in the season. What CJ Stroud shows up, can the Bills get him to the ground? He was sacked a ton last year. And on the other side of the ball, can the Bills and their offensive line do what they did last year and keep Josh Allen upright against that pretty good Texans pass rush as the Bills try to navigate that good secondary, like you said. So I think this is one of the tougher games on the schedule that maybe we aren't talking about or people aren't talking about a lot. But that Texans team, I think, is going to be good again this year. If they get that run game going, that's when they really had that success last year with Joe Mixon when he got rolling. Those best games the Texans had were the games where he really got high volume, 20-plus carries, and they really fed him. So who knows what these teams will look like, you said that point in the season. But that Texans team, also fun to watch, and it'll be a tough one.
Looking at Pittsburgh, the big question with Pittsburgh is who's the starting quarterback going to be? Obviously, we head into 425 at the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the NFL scheduling Jets Steelers week 1 has a pretty good inclination of who the Steelers quarterback is going to be. The biggest rumor that I've been hearing from people is that Aaron Rodgers to Pittsburgh is a done deal, but Aaron Rodgers wants nothing to do with OTAs and spring workouts, so they don't want to make him look bad, and they'll sign him right before training camp. So it could be Aaron Rodgers. It could be Mason Rudolph. It could be Will Howard. Who knows who the quarterback is going to be for the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point? Tough to project, but it's likely going to be Aaron Rodgers. They have Caleb Johnson replacing Najee Harris. They have DK Metcalf replacing George Pickens. And then for the most part, that offense is pretty chalk. Very similar skill position players outside those two guys I just mentioned. Same offensive line. So not much change to a rather ineffective offense. Kind of a befuddling, bewildering decision the Steelers made this offseason there. And then the defensive side of the ball, again, Darius Slay adds a veteran corner across from Joey Porter Jr., which is something they needed. Derek Harmon Jr. Injects some youth into that defensive line, which is something they needed. But you look at it, the Buffalo Bills have the rest advantage coming off of Thursday Night Football, and the Steelers are going to be a tough team, but it's hard to be scared of them, to be honest with you. There's just a lot of aging guys and a lack of firepower on that football team. The rumors were that JJ Watt kind of wants out, and I think there's a reason why JJ Watt kind of wants out of, not JJ Watt, excuse me, TJ Watt kind of wants out of Pittsburgh. I think he sees the writing on the wall there with the Steelers. So it'll be interesting to see if once Rodgers gets there, things can change, but kind of a stale football team. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking past the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they're not a team that I see on the schedule that scares me all that much.
Yeah, this one's interesting. I mean, going to Heinz Field or whatever they call it now, I don't even know what the name of it is these days.
Name that's hard to pronounce.
Yeah, but they come in after going on the road to Chicago the week before, and then they go on the road to Baltimore the week after. So they have a little tough stretch there with the Cincinnati Bengals playing them before that Chicago game. So a really tough stretch there for the Steelers. The quarterback is going to be the big question. I still think that defense is really talented. I didn't think that roster had a ton of holes. I thought obviously the quarterback was the big question. I like Caleb Johnson, I think, as a pairing with Jalen Warren. They have Kenny Gainwell too. They signed the thing to me was like, you finally got a dude to pair with George Pickens and DK Metcalf, and then you trade George Pickens away. So you're kind of back to square one. I feel like if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers when it comes to offensive weaponry, because yes, Calvin Austin, and we liked Calvin Austin, the pre-draft process, finally made some contributions last year. What is going to come of Roman Wilson, their second-round pick from a year ago, has battled injuries. We liked him as well. And then there's DK Metcalf, who's going to be throwing him the ball, right? I just wonder what that team is going to look like at that point in the season. And so don't want to look past the Steelers, especially on the road, because I think that's a tough place to play. And Mike Tomlin, every year, that team's going to be competitive. They're going to be probably in the mix around 500, maybe a little over, fighting for a playoff spot. And I think there will be a lot of motivation for that team at that time of the year. And the Bills have had the Steelers' number in recent times that they've played them, but I certainly wouldn't overlook them.
Next up is week 14, 425 versus the Cincinnati Bengals. This is another game that the NFL wanted in this 425 window. It's probably going to be a pretty big deal. But the Bengals are another team that had a really interesting offseason just from the fact that they were, for the most part, again, another team that was practically chalk. I mean, in my opinion, they got worse at defensive coordinator in a big way, going from Lou Anarumo to Al Golden. I think they scapegoated Lou Anarumo, who's now in Indianapolis. He didn't have that much talent, and they didn't add that much talent this offseason. Why? Because they had to pay their dudes. They had to pay Jamar Chase. They had to pay T. Higgins. So it's a weird team. I mean, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, they're a lethal combination that can carry a football team when healthy. We've seen it, right? They've also got Mike Gesicki. They're bringing back the same offensive line, which is kind of just like a so-so offensive line. They've got Chase Brown and Zach Moss, and they're bringing in Samaje Perine. So offensively, like, they're probably fine if Joe Burrow can stay healthy and those receivers can stay healthy. But defensively, you have Trey Hendrickson holding out. They added Shamar Stewart and TJ Slayton. They had a lot of linebacker competition: Oren Burks, Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter. They completely left the secondary untouched. I mean, the Bills have a rest disadvantage with Cincinnati coming off Thursday Night Football the week prior. But this Bengals team, man, it's a weird team. When they have the big three healthy, they're lethal because of the big three, but nothing else about that football team outside of Trey Hendrickson is very, very scary at all.
Yeah, what happens with Trey Hendrickson has said he's not going to play without a new deal. For whatever reason, though, the Bills have struggled against this Bengals team, sort of the 2.5 games they've played against them in the last couple of years, that this Bengals team has kind of had the Bills' number. Defensively, they don't scare me in the least, right? The secondary looks really bad. Their offensive line is average, but for whatever reason, that offense has really had the Bills' number, and the Bills haven't really taken advantage of Cincinnati having an average defense either over the last couple times they've played them. So to me, I think this game comes down to the Bills' offense really needs to have, a game that they have had in very much almost every other game they've played across the past several years. And that's an above average offensive performance. And they just haven't had that against the Cincinnati Bengals. And you have no really excuse for that with how bad this defense looks like it is on paper. So yes, that offense can be scary. But obviously the Bills do get this game at home, which is nice in that 425 window. Certainly are in a really good position to take that one. But some teams just have your number, and for whatever reason, the Bengals have had the Bills' number, so they got to prove that they can beat them, and hopefully convincingly.
Josh Clark coming in with a great comment. He says, glad our young corners have most of the year to get their feet wet before playing Chase and Higgins. That's a really great point there. Yeah. Getting to see them week 14 is definitely better than, hey, Mad Max Hairston, welcome to the NFL. Go cover Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. So, get some time to get their feet wet. Definitely a good thing. Week 15, 1 p.m. at New England in Foxborough. The Buffalo Bills once again have a rest disadvantage with New England coming off of their bye. I think the NFL is really trying to make New England the major competitor with the Buffalo Bills this year, scheduling the Bills and the Patriots in primetime early, giving the Bills an early bye and the Patriots a late bye, giving the Patriots their second game against the Bills off of a bye. I don't know, like maybe schedule makers here are trying to really make New England a thing in terms of challenging the Buffalo Bills for the AFC East. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. And maybe this year is the year that New England gives it a whirl.
Really interesting finish to the season for New England. So they have that late bye in week 14, and they play the Bills, and they go to Baltimore, then they're home Jets, home Miami. So they have 3 home divisional games along with a road Baltimore game to end their season.
Wants it. The NFL wants it.
Yeah. Yep.
Week 16, the Buffalo Bills have a 1 p.m. game at Cleveland. I think that'll be pretty rowdy. I think a lot of Bills Mafia will get out to Cleveland. As someone who has been to Cleveland before, I can tell you it is a really good time. I was at the game where CJ Spiller broke his collarbone. We still won, but that was sad when CJ broke his collarbone there. He was having a great start to the season. Cleveland, they got some quarterback issues. Obviously, Deshaun Watson not going to play. Is it going to be Joe Flacco? Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? Did you see the video? Not the video, but the picture on social media, the difference between the hand size of Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett.
Yes.
That was
I thought it was photoshopped at first, but it wasn't.
Hilarious. If you haven't seen it, get on social media and find it. Just the way Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco grip a football differently because of the difference in their hand size is legitimately hilarious. You obviously have Shador there. You have Dylan Gabriel there. Just an absolutely hilarious quarterback room. Just stupid funny. I think they have a really fun young backfield in Judkins and Ford and Sampson. I think they have a really fun trio of wide receivers in Tillman, Thrash, and Judy. I'm really high on Tillman. I was really high on Thrash last year. They got some nice tight ends. David Njoku, I think Fannin ended up in the perfect place there with Kevin Stefanski. I think he's going to use him well. Their offensive line is healthy, and they haven't been healthy the last couple of years. They'll be healthy. They'll be back. I'll tell you what, I think Kevin Stefanski, I think very highly of Kevin Stefanski as an offensive mind. I think if any one of those four quarterbacks has a pulse, he can make that offense serviceable. He can make them decent. He can make them good enough. So then you look at the defensive side of the ball in Cleveland. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out for the year. That's huge. That stings. He was such an awesome player. He's got that neck injury. That's really unfortunate. They drafted Carson Schlesinger to sort of replace him. They got Myles Garrett and Mason Graham up front. They added Malik Collins. The depth of their defensive line isn't where it has been in years past. That might be their downfall this year. They've got a really solid secondary. I think Cleveland could be a better team than people think if one of those four quarterbacks can have a pulse. Still, obviously, a must-win for the Buffalo Bills, but I think Cleveland can probably push closer to 500 or slightly above 500 than people think. If any one of those four quarterbacks has a pulse. If they can't figure it out at quarterback, they're screwed. They're winning 3 or 4 games. But if one of those guys can figure it out, I think they can win 8, 9, 10 games. So it's going to be a tougher matchup, I think, than people think if they find that quarterback.
Yeah, I think it will come down to the quarterback. Obviously, we saw Flacco have a couple good games with the Colts a year ago. He still has a good arm, a good fit, obviously, with Stefanski there, I think, with Flacco. And look, I think it's going to come down to a roll of the dice as far as your guess is as good as mine as what quarterback it's going to be come that time. If I'm going to put money on it right now, I'd probably say it's going to be Shador by that time in the season, but we'll see. I think the Browns at Cleveland will be a tough out. Like you said, that place will be rowdy. That could be a game that means something for both teams. Bills maybe for seeding, Cleveland maybe fighting for a playoff spot. So, a late in the year sort of Cleveland Buffalo game, it kind of feels like it could maybe mean something. And look, the Bills, was it the last time they went into Cleveland? Was that game where they stopped Cleveland on the goal line 8 straight times because of all those penalties? I think the Bills ended up losing that game, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's not going to be an easy one, I don't think. And yeah, Stefanski has had his ups and downs there in Cleveland, but I think some of that also has to do with things sort of, he has control, but I don't know how much of everything is in his control there as far as that quarterback situation.
Week 17, another 425 big window game at home versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, new offensive coordinator and Kevin Patullo. That's an internal hire. Obviously, they still have Nick Sirianni there as well, who's an offensive mind. They're mostly running it back on offense. Kenneth Gainwell is gone. They've added A.J. Dillon. They've obviously, I think, they really want that Will Shipley to step up, I think, into that Kenneth Gainwell role. They added Kylan Granson, which I think could be a sleeper addition for them at the tight end position, sort of like slot receiver. I can see him in a Sirianni offense eating a little bit, maybe being a surprise player this year. On defense, they're elevating their guys, right? Ajomo, Smith, and Hunt are stepping in for Sweat and Williams. Replacing those depth guys are guys like Ty Robinson and Powell Ryland, and they added Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari as some sort of bargain bin reclamation projects along the defensive line. I'm sure they'll have some success with those guys. They always seem to. They trade up for Jihad Campbell because of the issues with Nakobe Dean. They added Andrew Makuba to that secondary, and it's already a good secondary, and they added Andrew Makuba to it for competition. So it'll be interesting to see. That defense should be gelled by the time they play the Buffalo Bills. It'll be interesting to see how healthy they are on offense by the time they get to Buffalo. I certainly don't think the depth is that great. An injury or two here or there. Like if Saquon goes down, that offense looks a lot different, right? Like if Jalen Hurts goes down, that offense looks a lot different. You can say that about every team, I guess, but by the time you get to week 17, there's just so many wild cards, right? And I think that offense is so dependent on like the star power, and the depth is lacking on that offense. So who knows if they're healthy or not by the time the Buffalo Bills face them, but you could say the same thing about us. But that should be a really fun matchup week 17, especially if everyone's healthy.
Yeah, and that star power they have is truly star power, right? Between Devonta and AJ Brown and Saquon and Hurts. I mean, you talk about like the Bills secondary getting seasoned early in the year to face, Chase and Higgins. How about facing the Philadelphia Eagles a couple weeks later, right? Like you're going to be tested in this one. Certainly feel like they are on the very, very short list of Super Bowl favorites again this year, even with losing some of those guys, because they have guys that are going to step up and fill in. And that Eagles do such a good job of that with their draft and their signings. And they always seem to have guys that just fall in their lap. Jihad Campbell, I mean, man, and him and Makuba to me are just like, wow, like they just, they are just going to be, I think, great players for that team and contribute a lot this year. And probably by that point in the season, contribute even more, especially Makuba, I think. Even though Reed Blankenship is kind of a cult favorite there in Philly, I think he'll get pushed from Makuba there. But that's a really good team again, well coached, and while it's an AFC NFC clash late in the season, maybe it's a Super Bowl preview, maybe it's both teams fighting for the one seed in the respective conferences. So
maybe
it should be
it's
interesting.
an MVP statement game between Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen too. So who knows? Fingers crossed. Like if that's like sort of an MVP showcase or a Super Bowl preview, that means the season went well for both of those teams.
Exactly.
The Bills close out the season week 18 versus the New York Jets. We already talked about the Jets, and that game obviously is going to be completely determined based on what the Buffalo Bills record is. Are they playing backups? Are they playing for a 1 seed? Did New England make a miraculous run and the Bills need to win this game to clinch the AFC? Like what happens, right? That game is completely dependent on the 17 that came prior. But to wrap things up here tonight, right? Like I said this at the top of the show, on paper, using last year's wins and losses, which I hate to do, this is the 5th easiest schedule in football. I think it's tougher than that. But I also think the Bills are already an elite team who got even better. Like 11 to 13 wins to me and an AFC East crown. That's the standard that I'm going to hold them to. And I'm hoping they get to the higher end, 13, maybe even 14 wins, and they push for that number 1 seed. That's gravy. I would love it if we get it. I'm not going to lose my mind if we don't, because I understand it's a tough thing to do, and it's a long season. It's a grind, and injuries happen, and all those things happen. But again, the expectations for this Buffalo Bills team is get to the playoffs. And then when you get to the playoffs, you got a chance to do something. 61 regular season wins the last 5 years, number 2 in the NFL. 7 playoff wins the last 5 years, number 2 in the NFL. 0 conference championships to show for it. 0 Super Bowl appearances to show for it. 0 Super Bowl wins to show for it. So get through that regular season. Let's have fun. Let's make memories. Like, let's get another AFC East crown, but then the postseason hits, and that's when the real business begins.
Yeah, and it's, not that we're running out of chances imminently, but like each year that goes by, right, is another chance that could have been, right? I do think the schedule is a little harder than, what can we go by? We go by last year's records. I think teams like New England, who we play twice, are bringing that strength of schedule down. I think Cleveland's bringing that strength of schedule down from a year ago, obviously based on the records. But I think those are 2 teams, for example, then you play 3 games between them, that are going to be better this year than they were a year ago. I expect Atlanta to be better this year, and that game on the road at Atlanta, I don't think is going to be easy. Because we play the NFC South and because we play New England and the Jets twice each, it makes it seem easier than it probably will be. On top of the fact that, of course, you play these other 3 division winners in Kansas City and Philadelphia and Houston, which are your sort of 3 extra games on the schedule out of the standard divisional, opponents you play in the NFC South and the AFC North. You got those 3 other games that are really just premier games on the schedule. So it's nice to have a lot of those primetime games at home. I think 4 of the 5 are at home, if I'm not mistaken. But wish there would have been one more maybe late in the year at home. That one late in the year is on the road at Houston. So, and it's a Thursday game. So an interesting schedule. I think 12, 13 wins certainly seems within reach. And you wonder if 13 wins maybe would get you the 1 seed, but we will see.
And hey, here is to hoping that the last game at Ralph Wilson Stadium is a home win in the AFC Championship game.
Yes.
That's the goal.
But
that's the dream. I should say that's the dream. I don't like to say goal, right? Like I don't know, something about it. Like I don't ever want to act too spoiled, right? Like I want to enjoy this ride. I want to, like the other night I put on Josh Allen highlights and I fell asleep to Josh Allen highlights. And my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Just let me live my life. Like, just let me fall asleep."
We don't know.
Josh Allen throwing
so
tutties. That's all I want to do, right? Like, so I feel like I just want to step back, enjoy the ride, right? Like even I felt a little queasy talking about like we have to win the AFC. I feel queasy just talking about that stuff, but obviously that's sort of what the show is about. Like I don't want to make these bold, grandiose statements. Like I don't want to set these like wicked high expectations. Like just get to the playoffs and then let's go on a run, dude. Like win the whole damn thing. Like we talk about all the time with Major League. Like I don't want to. There's different paths to achieve the ultimate goal. You don't need to be the 1 seed and be completely healthy and have everything go great and have everyone put up Madden numbers. Like that's just not reality. Teams come from all over the place to win the Super Bowl. Teams go through all types of adversity over the season to win the Super Bowl. Teams have absolute snoozers of games all the time and then somehow still manage to make their way into the Super Bowl. Like teams like plateau a little bit and then hit their stride late in the season. Like just a million different ways to achieve that ultimate goal. And we're going to have fun on the journey. We're going to embrace the journey this year, Dave.
We have to embrace the journey. And I mean, yes, we are going to look back on this time of Bills football at some point down the road. And whether it comes with a Super Bowl win or not, we hope it does. We will look back at Josh Allen, at least probably in my lifetime, as the best player this franchise has had ever at some point, and be really fortunate that we have him on a Hall of Fame trajectory, has the MVP, one MVP award already in tow. And now, with Josh Allen too, like for him, those things don't matter, right? He wants to win a championship for this team in the city. And at the end of the day, there are many ways to get there. And all you really need is a chance in the dance, right? So that's what you need to give yourself a shot. And we certainly think the Bills have a good enough team to do that this year.
Any final thoughts before we head out of here?
No, I think like it's a good time to kind of relax. I hope everyone has, good spring so far. Start enjoying your summer. Hope people are getting some, time off of work, going on vacations and stuff. Appreciate again the people who came in and joined me last week on the Q&A. That was really fun. This is a fun show as well. Just let's keep at it, and eventually 2 months away we'll get to training camp.
All right, thank you guys so much. Always appreciate it. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!